The Commanders just put Ethan POCIC on their radar, a center with 97 career starts and 9 seasons in this league, who got full medical clearance this week according to Adam Schefter at ESPN, and Washington has said absolutely nothing. That worries me because the New York Giants already have him on their short list, and if Peters stays quiet one more day, the man protecting Jaden Daniels in the middle of that offensive line gets signed somewhere else before the week is out. But what nobody is telling you is why bringing POCIC in right now could also be a serious mistake for this offense, and in a few minutes, I am going to break down exactly why. While Peters figures out whether he is moving on that center or not, Adam Schefter dropped 6 words this week that completely changed the receiver map in Washington. He said Brandon AIUK's post created an opening for Stefon Diggs, the man who played his college ball at Maryland, right in the DMV's backyard. AIUK shut that door on himself, and I am going to show you the numbers that explain why I think Peters is not touching him, and why that could be the best decision this front office makes all offseason, or the worst one, depending on what they do with that cap space. And to close it out, the sequel nobody asked for but everybody needs. Chris Paul versus Brandon Coleman for the left guard spot. Again, same story as last summer. Coleman is getting first-team reps at OTAs right now, but there is one athletic data point that most people are completely sleeping on, and it might flip who actually wins that job when camp opens. Do not go anywhere. Okay, I need everyone to actually pay attention here, because this is the kind of quiet story that turns into a massive problem if Adam Peters falls asleep at the wheel. Let's build the full context because there are layers here that most of the public conversation is ignoring. The base situation is this. This offseason, the Commanders made a call that honestly still leaves me with doubts. They released Tyler Biadasz, their starting center. Biadasz wasn't a star, but he was a reliable anchor in the middle of the line, and releasing him without a clear replacement in the building is the kind of move that only makes sense if Plan B is solid. So what is the current Plan B? Nick Allegretti, who signed an early extension this year back when cut speculation was swirling, and 6th round pick Matt Golban, a Michigan State transfer with versatility at guard and center. Allegretti played well filling in when Biadasz got hurt late last season. That's undeniable, and multiple reports describe him having an awesome rapport with Jaden Daniels, something that matters enormously at the center position for calling out blitzes. But here's the number nobody wants to say out loud. Allegretti played just 260 snaps in 2025 and finished with Pro Football Focus blocking grades below 50. At that rate, we're talking at best about a reliable backup with a long way to grow, and at worst, a hole waiting to happen. Now, the specific opportunity on the table, Ethan POCIC. 9 seasons in the league, started his career as a 2nd round pick out of Seattle back in 2017. Played 5 years there with 40 starts across 57 games, then spent the last 4 seasons as the starting center for the Cleveland Browns. Altogether, 97 starts in 114 games played. That's a proven professional, not an experiment. The problem is his 2025 ended badly. He started the first 13 games of the season with Cleveland, and in December he tore his Achilles, ending his year on the spot. His contract with the Browns ran out, he hit free agency, and for months his market was completely frozen. Understandably so, because nobody knew if he'd walk normally again, let alone play NFL football. But this week, ESPN's Adam Schefter reported that POCIC was medically cleared by Dr. Norman Waldrop to participate in camp, and a source told him directly the player is, quote, full go. That changes everything. A guy who was stuck in the medical deep freeze is now available, healthy, and tagged as the top free agent option left at his position. And I want to be honest with the numbers here, because the lazy take would say POCIC is an automatic upgrade, and it's not that simple. His 2025 with Cleveland wasn't an elite season. He allowed just 2 sacks and 826 snaps, which sounds spectacular, but his overall PFF grades landed at 63.2 in run blocking and 62.2 in pass blocking, putting him somewhere between 23rd and 25th among centers league-wide. We're talking about a solid, dependable, upper-middle tier veteran, the kind of resume that stabilizes a line without being flashy, well short of the all-pro level some folks are selling. I could be wrong, but I think that level is exactly what this line needs right now, more than a shiny name. The real obstacle here has less to do with POCIC's talent and more with locker room chemistry. Washington just hired David Blau as offensive coordinator, and he's bringing the zone blocking philosophy he learned under Ben Johnson, the same roots that later bloomed in Detroit and now in Chicago with the Bears. That scheme demands instant communication between the center and the quarterback at the line, quick reads on the defensive front on the fly protection calls before the snap. This isn't a scheme where you drop in any veteran and expect it to click immediately. Timing is everything. Allegretti already has that rapport built with Daniels from last year, and according to reports out of the building, that communication has been praised internally during the early installation weeks of the scheme. Bringing POCIC in now, just 2 weeks before camp, would mean rebuilding that communication practically from scratch, with a player coming off an Achilles tear who, even at his best, was a middle-tier center, not a zone scheme wizard. And I want to be fair to POCIC here too. 9 years of veteran experience in this league doesn't happen by accident, and his ability to diagnose fronts in both Seattle and Cleveland, two organizations with completely different line philosophies, says a lot about his football IQ. The real dilemma is this: is it worth sacrificing chemistry that's still being built for a longer resume and more raw experience? And that's where the last-minute alternative comes in, because Washington isn't evaluating this in a vacuum. According to analysis from the Big Lead this week, the New York Giants are already looking at POCIC as one of the 3 best landing spots in the market, precisely because their own center, John Michael Schmitz, is coming off poor PFF grades and recurring health issues. If the Giants move first, Washington loses the option entirely, and that's where I think Adam Peters is playing a dangerous game by staying quiet, because the silent rival here isn't just one other team waiting its turn, it's several. The Giants, sure, but there's also noise around similar needs across the league, teams seeing exactly what I'm seeing in POCIC, a reliable 1-year bridge while they develop a long-term solution. While Washington deliberates calmly, somebody else can simply pick up the phone, offer the 3-year, $31.8 million contract spot rack projects, and close the deal in an afternoon. And we're not talking about a guy asking for the moon. His previous deal with Cleveland was 3 years for $18 million, and across 9 seasons in the league, he's earned somewhere around $26.7 million total. For a roster sitting on almost $50 million in cap space, this isn't a complicated money negotiation, it's a negotiation of internal priority. Based on the last numbers reported at the start of this offseason, the Commanders had $49.63 million in available cap space. And while that exact figure has shifted since then with later signings, the underlying point still holds. Absorbing that contract is not a problem. What doesn't exist yet is the urgency, and honestly, that's the part of this silence that frustrates me most. My personal take on this: I think Washington should sign POCIC as real, honest competition for the job, without turning it into a public humiliation of Allegretti. Gap integrity in a zone scheme gets built with reps, not with names, and giving Darnell Stapleton, the offensive line coach, 2 starting caliber centers to compete for the job in camp is exactly the kind of depth a team with Super Bowl aspirations needs, especially with the franchise quarterback still on his rookie deal and every protected snap counting double. Daniels can't keep absorbing hits because the middle of the line comes up short. If Allegretti wins the job in a fair competition, great, that shows the coaching staff made the right call with real camp data, but not bringing POCIC in and risking that Gulbin, a 6th-round rookie, has to be the emergency plan B if something happens to Allegretti feels like a bet this roster in this contention window can't afford to make. What this means for the fans is simple: the Commanders' offensive line still has an unresolved hole with less than 2 weeks before camp. And the difference between winning that race against the Giants or losing it could literally decide how many times we see Jaden Daniels on the ground this fall. I'd rather overreact on protecting the quarterback than regret it in October. Okay, bro, we needed that offensive line breather, but hold on, because what's coming next in the receiver room is even crazier. Let's talk about Brandon AIUK with the seriousness this deserves, because for months, a chunk of this fanbase painted him as the savior coming to fix the receiver room. I never fully bought that narrative, and this week, Adam Schefter put actual numbers behind my doubt. Here's the context. AIUK has spent months on a social media spiral that started with an attack on the 49ers, his former team, and later escalated into throwing shade publicly at Jaden Daniels, his supposed close friend going back to their days together at Arizona State. That, for any general manager evaluating whether to bring a guy into the locker room, is a giant red flag. Not because of talent, but because of what it says about a player's judgment during a moment of professional uncertainty. And look, this didn't come out of nowhere. Schefter said it flat out this week on his podcast, and the key line, the one that actually matters, is this: AIUK's post created an opening for Stefan Diggs. That's just 6 words, but it sums up everything. Translation: the market no longer sees AIUK landing in Washington with the same certainty it did a few months back, and the direct beneficiary of that shift could be Stefan Diggs, who played his college ball at Maryland literally in the DMV's backyard. Let's be honest with the numbers too. The AIUK everyone remembers, the one who made second team All-Pro back in 2023 with true #1 production for San Francisco, is a version from quite a while ago. Since then came serious knee injuries, a season basically lost to recovery, and now this erratic behavior that hasn't even resulted in him formally applying for reinstatement. That last detail is the one that jumps out at me the most. Honestly, if he genuinely wanted to get back on the field as soon as possible, the logical first step would be starting that formal process with the league, and so far, that hasn't happened. He's still under contract with San Francisco, hasn't applied to come back, leaving everyone wondering just how much he actually wants to keep playing this game. Adam Peters runs a tight ship in Washington, and what AIUK has shown publicly simply doesn't fit the locker room profile this front office has built so carefully over the last 2 years, prioritizing character and professionalism over raw talent in almost every recent roster call. Diggs, on the other hand, comes with his own baggage. Nobody's gonna deny that. There's real history of friction in past locker rooms, but he's healthy, he's available right now, and he's still productive in a modern NFL offense. The DMV connection gives him an emotional layer AIUK never had with this franchise. He played his college ball at Maryland, minutes from Ashburn, and honestly, fam, that kind of story tends to play well both in the locker room and at the box office. That's not a guarantee everything goes smoothly. Diggs' history of friction with offensive coordinators is real and needs to be said without sugarcoating it, but at least you know exactly what production you're buying today, something nobody can say with certainty about AIUK anymore. My personal read, I don't think AIUK ends up in Washington. I think he closed that door himself with his own posts, and Adam Peters is going to prefer what he already has under David Blau's system before risking the locker room for a talent that's no longer a guarantee of anything. If Diggs enters the real conversation on a reasonable contract, I take that without thinking twice. If not, this offense has enough pieces to surprise people anyway. And well, fam, tell me down below what you would do, because this is one of those calls where the heart and the head don't agree. Listen, after all that locker room drama, we need something lighter, and nothing's lighter than watching 2 guards fight over the same job again like it's a summer tradition. This story makes me smile because it's basically a carbon copy of 2025. Brandon Coleman, a 3rd-round pick from 2024, entered last season as the expected starter at left guard next to Laramie Tunsil. He missed a good chunk of camp with an injury, started week 1 anyway, and 2 weeks into the season, the coaching staff benched him in favor of Chris Paul, a 7th-round pick from 2022 nobody was watching. Paul ended up playing 88% of the offensive snaps at that spot the rest of the year, and he did it well. Across more than 535 pass blocking snaps, he allowed just 17 pressures and 2 sacks. He was an unrestricted free agent this offseason. His market was cold, and Adam Peters brought him back on a 1-year, $3 million deal. Honestly, that says more about how the league values Paul than any analysis I could give. But guess who's taking the first team reps in this summer's OTAs? Coleman, again. And here's a testing detail people skip over. The athletic gap between the two is minimal. Paul has a poor short shuttle time and only a good rating in agility, but his overall profile isn't far off from Coleman's, and he's got better size plus better hand technique shown in live game action. Coleman's athleticism comes out of a scheme at TCU similar to the veer and shoot system Paul ran at Tulsa, so both guys naturally fit David Blau's zone philosophy, just in different ways. Paul with proven pass protection under real game pressure, Coleman with more agility to seal defenders in open space, even though he's never been a true power player in the run game. At one point during the pre-draft process, there was even talk of trying Coleman at center, but drafting Matt Gulbin along that same line lets him stay fully focused on guard. The Athletics' Nikki Javala summed it up well in her mailbag ahead of OTAs. She believes Coleman has a better shot at winning the guard job than competing at center. And that Paul's cheap 1-year, $3 million deal is proof the job is still far from settled. My opinion here is simple. Fam, this gets decided by real camp reps, not OTA narrative. Coleman taking first team reps in June doesn't mean anything yet. Paul was in that exact same spot a year ago and ended up winning the job with his play. The coaching staff should just go with the best player, period, without factoring in things like compensatory picks or a future Daniels extension. Those are fan excuses, not real football criteria. That's everything I've got for today, fam. And look, across these 3 stories, there's one thread connecting all of them: protection. Protection at center with POCIC still sitting on the open market, protection of the locker room by letting AIUK's drama stay somewhere else, and protection at left guard, 2 guys fighting over who covers Jaden Daniels' side better. This franchise has spent almost a year building around one single idea, surrounding our franchise quarterback with the best possible version of this roster. I still don't know if Adam Peters is going to move on POCIC. I still don't know if Diggs really ends up here, and I still don't know who wins the guard job. What I do know is that with this rebuilt defense and this offense carrying more weapons than last year, Washington has everything it needs to be back in the fight come January. If this video gave you something, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me down in the comments which of these 3 stories has you the most nervous heading into camp. I want to read every single answer. See you in the next one.